Hello and welcome back to Tech News Nerds, your source for the latest in tech. I'm your co-host Adam,
And I'm your co host, Johannes.
and this is episode 3 where we're going over a bunch of interesting stories.
Okay, so let's start off with the first story, which is the iPhone 12 120 hertz debacle. And yeah, it's actually pretty funny because all year long, I mean up until this point, we've all been expecting, oh, iPhone 12 series definitely gonna get 120 hertz, all the leaks and everything. We even had like PVT models that had 120 hertz refresh rate, and all of a sudden all of our expectations came crashing down. And yeah, the main issue I think is that a lot of people kept on, coming to Apple's defense, saying that, yeah, who needs 120 hertz on, an iPhone? The main issue is that a lot of people were like, jumping to Apple's aid, saying that, yeah, I mean, we don't need 120 hertz on on an iPhone. It feels good enough. iOS feels smooth enough, and it's not a necessity. This and this and that and that. And I'm like, okay, well, yeah, you do make a fair point, but I mean, yeah, look, some comments here are like, what if they're capable of making a narrower? And oh, we'll get to the notch later. It's embarrassing not to have 120 hertz. Most of the rivals phones already include it. Now, that's the thing. Apple is not a company that really likes to compete with, their Android counterparts. They always like to pretend like, most other smartphones don't even exist. They like to pretend Android doesn't exist. So the fact that 120 hertz isn't in the iPhone 12 series, I feel like, okay, it's it's a big deal for some people, but then at the same time, it's not that huge of a deal because they'll probably bring it out next year. They weren't able to make it feel as appley as they would like. And yeah, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, obviously we've talked about this in a couple episodes where I've been quite disappointed, but what's really interested me is the response to it, just like you said. You have this big camp of people who are like, "Oh, we don't need 120 hertz. Why does the average consumer need it?" And then there's these tech enthusiasts who really want it. And as we've seen, the iPad Pro has 120 hertz, and we've talked about this before. And I think the distinguishing feature is that that is a Pro model, and the iPhone 12 could very much benefit from 120 hertz in the Pro models to kind of distinguish themselves from the regular models. This year, the regular models are probably going to be a much better buy unless you need that huge display of the 12 Pro Max.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just funny to me. So obviously, I want 120 hertz. I used it on the Note, used it on the S20 Ultra. I absolutely love it. I've used 90 hertz on the Pixel, 90 hertz on the OnePlus 7 Pro. So high refresh rates have been great for me. That being said, I can use phones at 60 hertz. It's just something I miss. And when you're paying this much for the 12 Pro models, I'd kind of expect it now, just given how much time everyone's had with it. Even Google, who's been late to a bunch of features, brought 90 hertz last year. So it's I'd want us to expect better from Apple. You're right that they don't try to compete with Android. That's not their goal. But this is something that can help the user experience. People will notice the smoothness. Not everyone will. Maybe all the average consumers won't. But I think people will notice it. And Apple's A14 Bionic is very um it's a great chip, and people are going to use it for gaming, and iPhones with 120 hertz could be much better for that as well. So those are my thoughts.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you there. We should expect more from Apple because while the fact that yeah, they like to take things at their own pace and like perfect the technology before bringing it out, I'm not really impressed by all of the people, jumping to their defense with some very with some excuses or some reasons that don't really hold much water. While I agree that okay, from the point of view, they've already done 120 hertz on the iPad Pro. And then coming back to your point that that's a Pro model, they already like devalued the name Pro, in my opinion, when they brought out the iPhone 11 Pro and Pro Max with like without any of the Pro features last year. There was no 90 hertz or 120 hertz refresh rate. There were like no Pro features that we would come to expect. Like the MacBook Pro has what distinguishes it from the MacBook Air. The iPad Pro has what distinguishes it from the normal iPads. What made the iPhone 11 Pro and Pro Max different? One more camera? Like it was, yeah.
That it was the display. The display was much better. It was an OLED and it was over 1080p, where the 720p LCDs were on the smaller models. But I believe that that play on the word pro was just to confuse the average consumer. I know my mom actually has the 11, and she's like, "Oh, I have the best one, right? I have the 11. That's the newest one." Oh, no, there's a pro. Wait, what's a pro? So I think it really confused the average consumer from a naming category. They think they're getting the newest one, but in a lot of instances, the 10s is successor is actually the 11 Pro and Pro
hmm
Max.
Exactly. And that's what I was trying to come back to. Like the 10s and the 10s Max had OLED displays. They had displays that were more than 1080p. But there was no Pro anywhere in the name. So why did Apple feel the need to like say 11 Pro? Why not just 11s and 11s Max? Like if I'm making any sense.
Yeah,
So
definitely. Yeah.
yeah, so if we're expecting like 120 hertz from the 12 Pro series just because the name is Pro, I feel like we're going to be very disappointed, which we were, or which we are.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point. You're right that the pro name in this instance does not mean as much as it maybe should. I feel like the Apple should, if they're going to name something pro, make it better, but they're just throwing it around.
hmm
Okay.
Yeah.
So should we go on to the next story?
Yeah, I think we should move on to the
All
next
right.
story.
So the next story, we haven't really covered any like gaming consoles or anything, but we are for the first time. Um, the Xbox Series S and Series X, as well as the PS4, were given release dates as well as prices. And then we also saw that some of the tech reviewers got hardware from Microsoft. So just like with the Surface Duo, they couldn't show any of the software or anything. And in this case, unlike the Surface Duo, they didn't even have the components, and you could just see how big the hardware was. But that being said, we'll talk about Microsoft first. So, Microsoft introduces the Series S and Series X. Both are going to come out at November 10th, and the Series S is going to be $300, and the Series X is going to be $500. And the thing that distinguishes these the most is the graphics performance. I believe it's 4 teraflops on the Series S and 12 teraflops on the Series X. And Dave 2D actually went into this, and he said where this is going to make the most difference is in 1440p versus 4K gaming. The Series S will be able to 1440p game with 120 FPS. Pretty good for a gaming console.
Oh yeah.
And the Series X 4K, and they also support 120 FPS. So that was definitely interesting to see. I'm very
hmm
happy that we can get a next gen console at $300, which is great. And then the
hmm
PlayStation 5, they we'll show you guys that as well. The PlayStation 5 announced the digital version and the regular version at $400 and $500 respectively, which is great to see. I think that $400 is really pushed by the Series S because all the rumors were saying it was going to be 450. So
hmm
maybe it is possible Microsoft pushed that price down just a little bit, which is good.
hmm
Um, I'll quickly talk about the advantages and disadvantages of both. So the PlayStation's going to have faster storage speed, and the Xbox is going to have a slightly more powerful overall like CPU GPU. So other than in the Series S, of course, which will have a less powerful GPU.
Hmm.
But PlayStation will have the arguably better exclusives. It'll have the higher tech controller with the haptic feedback in it, which looks really cool.
Hmm.
And Xbox will have the cheaper model, which is great. And they will have Xbox Game Pass available for it. So that's also nice. What are your thoughts on the consoles? I know you're a PC guy, right?
PC Master Race. Oh yeah. While you were talking, a weird analogy just came to my mind, and it's kind of like PlayStation is the Apple of consoles, while Xbox is like Android, where Xbox has the like for example with the Series X, they have like the better specs, technically on paper, but PlayStation might deliver you the better overall experience. They have the better exclusives, like Apple has the better apps. And yeah, I think it all boils down to what your preference or what your priorities are. I feel like the PlayStation, yeah, while it delivers a very good user experience, it's also more of a status symbol. Like when you go into someone's house and you see that they have the PS5, you're like, oh my God, wow, it's a PS5. And when you see someone, you go to someone's house and they have an Xbox Series S or X, you're like, wait, what's that? Is that a new router? Is that a vacuum cleaner? Like, what is that? Yeah, it's like it's weird. It's weird that way. But like Xbox also has like they have very good services that they deliver, like Game Pass, like you mentioned earlier. And yeah, while I'm not a huge console person, I'm actually looking forward to both. I love the as much as this might sound divisive, I really love the design of both of them, especially the digital PS5 version. I mean, the one with the CD slot looks kind of iffy, but yeah, the digital one looks really sleek, and the Xbox Series X, that matte black box is just, oh my god. Looking forward to the console exclusives for the PS5 though, because no, they have a really strong lineup. They've got Spider-Man Miles Morales, they've got God of War Ragnarok. Like those are two games that I'm like, yeah, really looking forward to them.
Yeah, definitely. And what we should note is the PlayStation 5 just had pre-orders and sold out just about everywhere right away. It was so quick. So although Xbox has that lower price, what Xbox should have done is open their pre-orders early. Xbox's
Hmm.
pre-orders are on like the 22nd or 23rd, I believe, of
Hmm.
September, of course. And if they had done it first, maybe people wouldn't have jumped as much into the hype of the PlayStation and they could have got some more orders. So I don't
Hmm.
understand why they didn't open up those pre-orders before Sony did, even though they announced everything first.
Hmm. Yeah, I because I noticed RJ said, RJ from RJ Tech, shout out to RJ. Shout out, yeah. So yeah, he said that he wanted to pre-order the PlayStation 5, and like as soon as he went on the site, like he realized they were sold out like immediately, and he's like, "Oh wow, what the heck?" But one thing I noticed was he just mentioned that the PS5 was sold out. He did not mention, "Oh, maybe I should look into getting an Xbox," because like a lot of people, yeah, you notice that like a lot of people just based on all the hype surrounding the PS5 and all the exclusives that were announced, if Xbox had, like you said, released their pre-orders earlier, they would have been like, okay, perhaps we should look into Xbox. They've got Game Pass. It's like the Series S is cheaper, and yeah, this might be a better bang for my buck. But because the PS5 was, available already, and then they keep dangling these beautiful games in front of them, everyone is gonna want a PS5. At this point, I want a PS5. So
Yeah,
it's like,
I almost ordered one.
yeah.
So like the digital version was sold out when I went to go pre-order one. I was like, all right, if that's available, I'll get it. I went on Best Buy and all. I was like, all right. But that was sold out and I could technically get the one with the disc, but then I'm like, all
Hmm.
right, now I'll wait. and maybe I'll get the Series S. We'll see. I actually don't know. I'm not a huge gamer, but I do like to game every now and then. And at $300, I can play most of the next gen games
Mm-hmm.
on that Xbox. But I really like the controller for the PlayStation, and like you said, God of War, Spider-Man, Miles Morales. It's gonna be sick. So
Man, it is.
yeah. So we'll definitely have to watch this, but I think the PlayStation is going to win again.
Oh
And
yeah.
it's kind of funny because, like you said, it's like Apple and Android, but it wasn't always like that. The Xbox 360 did extremely well. At least here in the US, most people, oh, you got an Xbox? At that time,
Mm-hmm.
Xbox 360 felt like the more popular option here.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. Well, I guess time changes things because, it's kind of the same story with like a lot of Android devices. Back then, if you had a HTC phone, people were like, "Oh wow, is that the new HTC? Oh my God, like you're so." Same thing with BlackBerry. Same thing with even Samsung back then in the S2, S3 days. People are like, "Oh wow, is that a Galaxy S2?" Like, "Oh my God, really?" But nowadays, people are like, "Oh yeah, okay, Samsung. It's not an." Whatever. Like.
right. I literally have a folding phone, and people are like, wait, but that's not an
And it's
iPhone.
not an iPhone though, so like yeah, green
But it's
bubble.
actually gathered some interest even in the couple days. So that is definitely cool to see. They're like, ooh, that folds?
Oh
So that's always
yeah.
really cool. But
Hmm.
yeah, definitely we'll have to see how this plays out, see how sales are, see what people are thinking,
Hmm.
and we'll see how PC influences it as well because you can get a lot of the Xbox titles on PC.
Hmm. Yeah.
All right.
Okay, so speaking about folds and foldy boys, yeah, Samsung have finally announced or unveiled or released the Galaxy Z Fold 2. Still such a beautiful name. Beautiful name. And oh my goodness, like really, they did address a lot of the issues we had with the original Galaxy Fold. I mean, you have the OG Fold, and I like, looking at your video after watching a lot of, YouTubers with the Z Fold 2, I just couldn't help but notice all of the problems that were, with that device. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you realize as well. You open it, you see that notch in the corner, you're like, oh God, it's a notch. And then you close it, yeah, and then you have the tiny display in the front, and you're like, but apart from aesthetics, I mean, okay, we've got the new and improved like camera system. It's very similar to that on the Note 20 Ultra, which is really cool. Apparently, Samsung included a pre-installed screen protector this time, but they still told people, yeah, but then they still told people not to take it off by themselves. They're
Yeah, I
like,
think Marquez said that, didn't he? He's like, all right, you
yeah,
need to have somebody else take this off because,
yeah,
and I'm sure it's fine. Like, I think they had the same exact thing with the Z Flip, and
mm-hmm,
Mr. Mobile took his off without any issues, but you're just
mm-hmm,
always scared. And even with this one, it's durability issues.
mm-hmm.
You're scared, you want to baby the thing.
Oh, you have to baby the thing. I mean, it's so expensive. Yeah, you have to baby the thing. Yeah, the first I think one of the first review units of the OG Galaxy Fold to break was Marquez's, and that was because he was trying to get the screen protector off, but it was actually the screen. So I would not be surprised if he actually tries to take the screen protector off and breaks it again. But I mean, it's all love. It's all love. Like I'm not shading Marquez. Like yeah, he's the goat. But yeah. So yeah, the Galaxy Z Fold 2 is actually really interesting. And man, I really, RJ. Shout out to RJ again. Man, this dude is on fire. Like
Yeah,
he
absolutely, man.
yeah, he recently got the Z Fold 2, and he's just been talking about how amazing it feels in the hand. It's much smaller than you actually think it would be. And, it just makes me want the device even more. I mean, just honestly, like, I just want to touch it. Like, I don't need to own it, I just want to touch it because it's just that appealing. And I feel like that's one thing Samsung has always been really, really good at, making devices and smartphones that just draw your attention to them. Like you look at a Samsung smartphone and you're like, oh, that's shiny. I want to touch it. Like the software experience might, have it might leave more to be desired, but their hardware game is really on point. And yeah, I think they've done really well with the Z Fold 2. And yeah, I don't really agree with, I'm not really sure about the title of this article, the phone of the year, because yeah, it might be, but the fact that it's not really available to a lot of people, dude, it's 2,000 freaking dollars. Like,
Absolutely.
it's yeah, it's expensive, and people are talking about how foldable phones are the future and such and so on and so forth. Yeah, they might be the future. I feel like they're present right now, so they're the present, but they're gonna get more accessible and more available in the future, and we have to wait until that point when the average consumer can get their hands on one of these, if that point in time comes, and then we get to see if it's something that actually deserves to be that deserves to exist, basically. Right now, it's a novelty. A lot of people will not even admit any of the faults it has, because people are like, no, it's one of a kind. It's the first, yeah. It's not supposed to be perfect. They're working on it. They're working on it. But what happens when we get to that point when they've actually gotten to a level where they're like, all right, you know what? We're gonna sell this at what, $1,000, at 900, $700. Anyone who wants to get this device can get it, and then the general populace get it, and they're like, oh, okay, now that I have it, and now that it was this cheap, is it actually all that it was hyped up to be?
Yeah. And I think there's a few things that need to happen for it to come to the general public. And
Mm-hmm.
one is the slab phones that we have now have to be
Mm-hmm.
almost perfected, which is getting close. Two, like you said, the price needs to come down. Three, durability issues need to be questioned or need to be addressed. So
Oh
I
yeah.
think a lot of that might be UTG, ultra thin glass, as we're seeing, but it's still not the top layer in either the Z Flip or the Fold. So I think at some point it needs to be layered with a few of those to where it can be. But so that also, and then of course, Apple needs to make one.
Oh yeah.
And
That
my thing is, I actually put out a tweet today because I was using the fold. I'm like, oh my God, how great would an iPad mini be that I could fold? It would have
with an
the
A14
app
Bionic
problem.
chip, yeah.
Yeah, with an A14 chip. So and that like I could edit on that thing. I edit on my iPad Pro. I could legitimately edit on an iPad mini with an A14 in it. And I
Mm-hmm.
could film on it if it has the great cameras that we see in the iPhone. It could literally be everything for me. And there would be no fragmentation because I've noticed it with the Fold. It's amazing. Don't get me wrong, but we can see app fragmentation with this. It's just not optimized for this screen. But we know that iOS is already optimized for a tablet experience, and a lot of those apps are. So just imagine the same form factor as an iPad mini, but now you can fold it and you get
Put
the
it in your
front display.
pocket.
Yep, put
Mm-hmm.
in your pocket and everything. So I'm waiting for that. I really hope that happens.
Mm-hmm.
But the Z
Fingers
Fold 2
crossed.
is very impressive. I think it's incredible. I'm happy that Samsung addressed a lot of the issues of the first gen, and I can't wait to see more of this. We're
Oh
gonna
yeah.
see a lot more too. So
Oh
hopefully the
yeah.
durability issues also hold up, but we'll have to
Mm-hmm.
see.
Yeah. Durability is like the biggest concern at this point, I feel. And yeah, I mean, Samsung had durability issues as well, moving forward, trying out different things with their different devices. I mean, when they decided that, oh, all their flagship devices are going to have the like double curves at the edges, people are like, okay, if you drop your phone, it's going to break. The S6 and S7 Edge were like the most brittle Samsung devices ever, but they worked on it. You could drop I've dropped my Note 9 countless times, and it's got like the massive, side, curves, and not once have I ever seen a scratch on my screen. I mean, granted, I use it with a tempered glass screen protector, but even when that breaks, it doesn't break from the edge. It would just crack from the middle or something like that. So yeah, they really stepped up their durability game um with the normal candy bar smartphones, and I think they could do it with this as well.
I agree. And a funny thing about that was Phone Buff did a drop test with the Note 20 Ultra, and from the front, it didn't crack. Gorilla Glass Victus on it was just so good that from the
Mm-hmm.
front, even with the curves, it didn't crack. It was the first one that ever withstood his he dropped it 10 times in a row face down on like concrete and it didn't break. But if I dropped mine once, it somehow would.
Oh,
Yeah, so that
don't
was
drop it.
interesting.
Oh yeah. Oh
Okay,
yeah.
so
Yeah.
Galaxy Fold, really cool concept. We'll see more about it in the future. Okay, so here we have the Microsoft Surface Duo review. And this is from The Verge, but we're going to talk about a lot of the aspects because the most important thing and what we wanted and saw from a lot of computer or a lot of reviewers is buggy software, bad camera. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The Surface Duo is a really cool concept, I believe. And we saw a lot of reviewers get it, and they loved the hardware aspect, as we talked about in a previous story as well. I was quite skeptical because I was like, all right, this isn't a foldable phone. But Microsoft didn't intend this to be a foldable phone. They intended it to be a dual screen phone for like
Mm-hmm.
productivity. And then when I thought about that more and I use dual screens at my work, I'm like, oh, this could actually be useful.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. And I also heard an interview with Panos Panay, which is Microsoft's CPO, Chief Product Officer. For those of you who don't know that, um, big head of the Surface line in general, which I've always liked. I actually was one of the I bought the first gen Surface Pro back in the
Oh
day.
wow.
So, and I enjoyed it. It wasn't perfect, but I really liked it because it was something different. And Microsoft
Mm-hmm.
has taken these risks. They've done it now with the Surface Duo. They did it in the past with the Surface. It was really the only good two-in-one tablet at the time. It it was some when they released that, they weren't very popular or anything. And I thought, wow, look what Microsoft's doing, and they actually executed that pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
But this time, it's not as much. Unfortunately, they don't have as much control of the software as they did with Windows on the Surface I had, but nevertheless, they probably should have done a better job given how much time they took them to actually release this.
Mm-hmm.
It was just so buggy. And then we have some hardware issues as well. We see the big bezels, no stereo speakers, 6 gigabytes of RAM on a multitasking product, questionable. And then yeah, the bad camera. We all
Yeah.
like good cameras on our phones to try to capture those moments, even if you're not into the camera.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you have to double tap and everything, turn it around. So it just probably can't capture those moments as easily, as well as not as well, because it is a single 11 megapixel camera that's more like a front facing camera. It'll be good enough for like Zoom calls and everything like that if you wanted to do that, but it's disappointing. And I am excited for Gen 2 because I feel like they can address all of this. And the hardware is really nice. And when I heard Panos talk about it, he got it. I was like, all right, this guy, he's good because he understands that a product isn't just specs, it's
Mm-hmm.
how it makes you feel and how um, when you use it, you feel about using it. Now,
Mm-hmm.
all that kind of is screwed up by these software issues, but I think they're going to get it right eventually. So, what do you think?
Okay. So yeah, for the Microsoft Surface Duo, I think this is actually a really unique device. I'm still not really sure what the target audience is because yeah, I feel like it is a productivity device. The hardware begs to differ a little bit, but like you said, hardware, only tells half of the story. So let's see. But then the other half of the story that was meant to be filled up by software is not really, being told because as we can see from what a lot of reviewers have been saying, the software doesn't really, measure up. And I feel like the problem with that is because Microsoft outsourced this, or they're running the Surface Duo on Android, and they're trying to make Android function like Windows, which is not really going to work properly. Windows was designed to work, as it does currently, as it works right now. Multitasking, productivity, and all of that. But Android was not. And the only way I see them, I mean, Microsoft could have put Windows on the Surface Duo, but then it would be a Windows Phone, debacle all over again, and they still would not have apps. What killed the original Windows phones? Lack of app availability. And yeah, I feel like the hardware is good. The fact that the hardware is good is a good sign, because software can always be fixed with like major updates. There, I feel they should really push out as many updates as possible to this device. The faster or the sooner they get it stabilized, the better it is. The better it's going to be for like everyone. So yeah, they need to push out a lot of software updates. For the camera, I cannot make any excuses for the camera. A 13 megapixel selfie camera is not it. It's not it. And I listened to the interview with Panos, and yeah, he was saying that yeah, they put the camera inside because of conference calls and so on and so forth. And I'm like, yeah, that's good, but you could have put another camera just on the rear. You could make it flush with the body, like no need for a camera bump. You could make it flush with the body of the device. I get that they were going for this very thin, very light aesthetic with the device, which they did get, but a 13 megapixel selfie camera is not going to function as well as a dedicated primary camera. You're not going to be shooting great pictures with this. I can assure you that. I mean, even iPhones don't have like mind-blowing selfie cameras. Like selfie cameras just aren't there yet, I think.
Yeah, and it's not just the megapixel. I think a lot of it has to do as well with the size of the sensor itself, because it's so
Mm-hmm.
small. Even the iPhones have 12 megapixel cameras, but they're a little bit bigger,
Mm-hmm.
in that big grill or whatever you want to call it, oven, you know. But yeah, definitely. And as for software, we know Microsoft is a software company, so we're gonna hope
Mm-hmm.
that they do push out these updates. And they
Mm-hmm.
did promise 3 years of software updates for this phone, so that's great to
Mm-hmm.
see. But
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
as for functioning like Windows, they brought in a team to make Android on this. And I think they might have done that a little bit too late because there's just
Mm-hmm.
too many stability issues. I
Oh
think
yeah.
how it runs is actually quite cool in theory. App pairs are nice. You can switch if you can switch seamlessly and everything, it'd be cool. But maybe you got to make more RAM so there's less issues because
Mm-hmm.
they could have memory issues, which is why you're seeing some of the bugs. But a lot of it, people have said that their swipes aren't registering. That's like the
Mm-hmm.
basics, Microsoft. You got to make sure that's happening.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
Yeah, we
Definitely will
will.
be
Yeah.
interesting, right?
Mm-hmm, definitely. I mean, like you said, Microsoft is a software company, based on the number of your Windows needs to update. Your Windows needs to update notifications I get on my laptop like every day. Yeah, I feel like they will push out like a couple of, fixes for the Surface Duo. I really don't want, like, one thing is I'm trying to maintain an open mind, because this is technically like the first of its kind. It's the first generation Surface Duo, so we should kind of, give it some room to grow. Cut it some slack. I don't want people to like, just go on Twitter or Reddit and start roasting the heck out of this device, because, as a lot of reviewers have said, the hardware is very, very good. It feels really premium. The software experience can always get better. I mean, look at Samsung, for example. TouchWiz was a travesty, was atrocious. But now One UI is like, one of a lot, it's a lot of people's like favorite software skin. I'm not saying it's the best, but yeah, exactly. It's feature packed, it's semi-stable, it's mostly stable.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, way more stable than TouchWiz.
then TouchWiz, definitely. It's loads more responsive. You actually don't feel like you're using a burden. And if Samsung, of all companies, with how fragmented they are, they have so many different products. If they could grow in the software department from TouchWiz to One UI, then Microsoft can definitely go leaps and bounds with, the Surface Duo. They just have to like stay dedicated and stay committed to it, and this could actually turn out to be something amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's going to be a combination of increasing some of the hardware aspects, like we talked about with the RAM, as well
Mm-hmm.
as, like you said, with the software tweaks to make it a lot less buggy. But in
Mm-hmm.
theory, it looks great. In practice, not as much.
Mm-hmm.
But first generation product, like you also brought up, we got to give them a little bit of slack here. This is the
Mm-hmm.
first like real dual screen Android phone that we've seen at least in a long time. I know the LG Velvet and V60 had the split screen like attachment or
Mm-hmm.
accessory, but they weren't actually like this.
Yeah.
So we'll definitely have to
Yeah.
see.
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited for Gen 2.
Oh
I
yeah, me
think
too.
they have something here. It's just going to take a little bit of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it will. We need to be patient.
Yes. We just don't
Yeah.
want to be because the tech industry, it moves fast.
Yeah, yeah, it does. Moves quite fast.
Yep.
And
All right.
so,
So the next story. So quick brief background on this story is that the US put Huawei on the entity list in May of 2019. Then they couldn't work with US companies and couldn't get US parts for their phone business and other businesses. And this has really crippled Huawei, especially in the phone sector, because at first they couldn't use Android, which was the operating system, obviously, they used. And then they had issues with the Taiwan semiconductor manufacturing company who supplied their chips for their Kirin processors, which they now can't make. So they have to either turn to MediaTek or Qualcomm, which Qualcomm would be interesting because they're a US company. And then there's also been things with like Samsung and LG have said, oh, they won't supply them displays because there's US parts or something. And then this has all driven Huawei to move to Harmony OS for their upcoming smartphones. They're finally ditching Android, and we'll see how this turns out. What do you think, Johannes?
yeah, well, first of all, this is really, really sad, and this is getting much sadder actually, because I feel like Huawei was, one of the companies that had so much potential. Because, not too long ago, people were actually saying that, Huawei was one of the companies that was gradually catching up to Samsung. They were going to give Samsung competition. Yeah, and then they get slapped on the US entity list. And yeah, all this happened. And then moving to Harmony OS can actually be pretty huge. I mean, if it works the way it's supposed to, if it works like anything we've heard like it's gonna be, then it's actually pretty huge, because then we're gonna have three big players in the market. We're gonna have iOS, Android, and then Harmony OS. But Aaron, Mr. Who's the Boss, said it in his May 30 video, and I said it in mine as well. That phone was the best phone you couldn't buy, and that's because of the lack of Google Play services. And if Harmony OS has something sort of like an equivalent to that, then but I mean, now thinking about it, do you think there could actually be anything equivalent to Google Play services?
Well, I really don't. At this point, we've seen the Huawei store, and it just doesn't have those core Google services. There's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
apps that use Google Maps or integrate Google into their services themselves, and you just can't use those on Harmony OS or the Huawei Play Store. And that's going to be an issue because of the reliance of the West on those apps. Now, that might not be as big of an issue in China. I think they could still sell a lot of phones there, but they were pushing the boundaries at one point to coming into places like the U.S., the U.K., and all them. And then now, this has just absolutely destroyed those chances. And Harmony OS could be interesting, but we're going to see the same kind of thing we saw with Windows Phone, where
Mm-hmm.
they couldn't get the app support and they died.
So yeah, yeah, app support is like really, really key. And I think Aaron mentioned in another one of his videos that the reason why we only have two operating systems, Android and iOS, is because in 2020 it's kind of too late to introduce another operating system, to the market. Because, we've had Android and iOS for so long now, for well over a decade, almost approaching, well over a decade, almost approaching 2 decades. And trying to introduce a new operating system this late, while a lot of developers, a lot of apps already use Google Maps, Google services as their default. A lot of developers aren't going to want to, rewrite their applications for a third operating system. We already have a problem with that on the Android side of things, with having app incompatibility, so on and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. It's quite sad to see because Huawei was pushing the boundaries when it came to their hardware. They make some really nice cameras. I've used the P30 Pro and I've seen the P40 Pro samples, and they're really nice. So it is sad to see this, but
Mm-hmm.
I think this is the start of the end of Huawei. But we'll
Yeah.
see, right? Maybe they
Okay.
smash this Harmony OS thing and do great, but we'll have to see. Okay, so that's going to do it for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching, whether you're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Anchor. We appreciate you all. And you have anything else to say?
Oh no, like you said, straight up, thank you guys so much for watching and or listening. Yeah. And we'll catch you in the next episode.
All right, hope you all have a good day and peace.
Peace.